Hey everybody, Ryan here at It Trailer. Today on our 2021 Subaru Forester, we're going to be showing you how to install the Curt Class 3 Trailer Hitch Receiver. But before we do that, why don't we check it out and make sure that this is something that's going to work for you. So right off the bat, I will say I really do like this hitch. I've installed all of them for the Forester that we carry here at It Trailer, with the exception of this one until today. And I will say, I think it looks the best. It just really does do a great job of blending in and really giving us a factory type appearance. So what I mean by that is really just how the hitch is actually made. You know, for the most part, this is going to be completely hidden, and really you're just going to see the receiver tube opening and the safety chain plates. And the plates are what I really think separate this one from a lot of the others. Because a lot of times on these completely hidden hitches, when you can see the receiver tube, the safety chains kind of make or break it. And with these being tucked a little bit further back and kind of angled up, I really think it just flows and looks really nice. But with that said, the appearance is just one of the important things as far as the hitch is concerned. The other thing that comes to my mind is you're going to want a hitch that's really versatile. You know, I see these Foresters being used to do pretty much a little bit of everything. You know, they're pulling a trailer or using accessories like a bike rack or cargo carrier. So if it were me, not only would I want something to look good, but function just as well. And this will do just that, not only for towing, but also for our accessories. It's going to give us some really good clearance, not only ground clearance because it does sit up nice and tight against the bottom of our bumper, but also that bumper clearance. So the end of the receiver tube is going to be just about flush with the edge of our bumper here. And that's not something you always see with these, you know, concealed type hitches that are mostly hidden. And that's really important, especially for a Subaru. You know, a lot of people use folding type accessories, and because where the hitch sits, that's going to give us that space that we need to take those folding accessories and put them in that upright position without having to worry about them hitting the back of our Subaru. With this hitch being a Class 3, it is going to give us that 2" by 2" receiver tube opening. It is a very common size. A ton of different accessories will work with it. It is going to have that standard 5/8 pinhole. Now keep in mind, a pin and clip does not come included, but if you need one, you can grab it right here at It Trailer. Safety chain openings are back a little ways, so they're going to give us plenty of clearance. That way it doesn't interfere with our pin and clip, and they're going to be large enough to use just about any size hook that you might have. The hitch is going to give us some good weight capacities. As far as the maximum gross tongue weight rating goes, that's going to be 350 pounds. And that's going to be the amount of weight that's pushing down on the hitch. So that's a pretty high number, and you should be able to use pretty much any size bike rack or cargo carrier that you'd want to, for example. As far as the maximum gross trailer weight rating goes, that's going to be 3,500 pounds. And that's going to be the amount of weight that is pulling on the hitch. So that is the weight of your trailer plus anything that you might have on it. I do always like to suggest, never a bad idea just to grab your owner's manual. That way you can make sure your Forester can pull that much weight safely. With that said, if you do plan on pulling a trailer, you are going to want the lights to work on it. That way you're safe and legal. And if that's your particular situation, recommend checking out the trailer wiring. That way you can accomplish that. Now let's go ahead, just grab a couple of measurements. That way we can try to figure out which hitch mounted accessories are going to work out best. If you go from the ground to the top inside edge of the receiver tube opening, that's going to be right at 15 inches. So if you plan on pulling a trailer, chances are pretty good you can use a ball mount that has a straight shank or one with a very small rise in it. If you go from the center of the hitch pinhole to the edge of our rear bumper, that's going to be right at 2 inches. And we kind of covered this earlier, but you can use that measurement to find out exactly if any of those folding accessories you have can be stored in that upright position without hitting the back of your Subaru. So when it comes down to it, you know, what more could you really ask out of the hitch? I think it looks really awesome, and I think you're going to be able to use it to do whatever activity you're trying to partake in, whether it's pulling that trailer or using those accessories. Now, as far as the installation goes, not gonna lie, it's a little involved. It takes a little bit of time, but with that said, it is straightforward. Nothing's really too challenging to get to or anything like that. And honestly, I think at the end of the day, you're only going to be installing the hitch one time, and I feel like the little bit of extra effort that you put in to get this one on is well worth it when it comes down to the finished product. But with that said, why don't we go ahead, pull into the garage, and put it on together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the back of our Subaru, and we need to open up our hatch. That way we can pull our taillights out. There's going to be this plastic cover here. You need to get that out of the way. There's going to be 2 plastic fasteners, and what you're going to do for these is take a Phillips head screwdriver and just very lightly turn it. That'll kind of pop the head of that screw out, and then what you can do is just grab it and pop it out. Do the same thing for this one up here. If it wants to just spin on you, the whole thing, you can kind of hold that outer ring, and a lot of times that'll allow you to get the center out and release the fastener. Then we can loosen up the panel. You may have to kind of grab the edge of it there. Just to kind of free it. Can work it up, set it off to the side, and then we can actually pull our tail light out. So there's going to be 2 10mm fasteners. Grab the tail light, just kind of carefully work it back. Then we're going to need to disconnect it. So there's the connector there. You can push down on the center of that tab. Pull back on it. That'll free the light. We'll set this off to the side. And from this point on, anything that we do to one side of our vehicle, we're also going to repeat on the other side because it'll be set up the same way. Now if you look underneath our vehicle, along the bottom edge of our fascia, we're going to have 7 push pin type fasteners that we need to pull out. And the way you can get these is by using a trim tool or a flathead screwdriver. You're just going to pry underneath the head of that fastener. And a lot of times these can be really tight, especially, you know, if you got some dirt or debris in there that has accumulated. So that's pretty normal. You're going to kind of pry down on the head of it. And work that whole fastener out. We'll have one more right here. If you keep working along, this one here at the corner, we can skip that one. We're going to have one here. One here. This one right here. We can skip this one, and then 2 more along this edge. If you move to our rear wheel well, up here at the corner, we're going to have a fastener we need to pull out. These are set up a little different. What you can do is take a flathead, kind of push in on the center of that fastener, and then that will allow us to get behind it and get it removed. What I went ahead and did was use some painter's tape along the edge of our quarter panel and fascia here because we're getting ready to remove it, and I don't want to accidentally scratch anything. With that said, with an extra set of hands on each side, we're going to start to remove the fascia. So pretty straightforward here. You can just work from the corner and pull out. Let's get to release those clips. We'll just work all the way around. And release it. And it looks like over here on the driver's side of our vehicle, we're gonna have a connector. Push down on the center of that tab and release it. And then we can just set our bumper off to the side somewhere safe. With the rear fascia out of the way, now we can actually remove our bumper beam. So this can be held in place with 3 fasteners. So we're gonna have 2 up at the top, 1 at the bottom. We're gonna use an extension and a 14mm socket. Get these removed. And this one here at the bottom. I went ahead and already did the other side of our bumper beam, so when I pull this one out, it should become loose. And kind of work it off and set it to the side for now. We'll kind of cover on how the hitch is going to go into place and work. So it's going to line up with these 3 holes here. We'll go over that stud in these 2 holes. I do suggest cleaning out those threads with a tube brush, getting any potential dirt, debris out of there. And what you're going to use to secure the hitch to these 2 holes is a bolt and a Conical Tooth Washer. Once the hitch is up there, these will thread in and make sure that the teeth are going to face this way towards the hitch. Over the existing stud, you're just going to use one of these flange nuts. And the hitch is actually going to replace the bumper beam, so you're not going to have to worry about putting that back on. And then if we look at the hitch, these arms here are going to slide into the opening. And there's going to be a couple of holes in those arms. One of the holes is going to go over that factory bolt there. So that hole's cut out so that doesn't interfere. And the other hole is going to line up with a hole in the frame rail. Now right now there's a rubber plug in there, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea looking from inside of the frame rail. We'll eventually come back and remove that plug to get the bolts in there. But with that said, we'll take our hitch and slide it into position. And then we'll take that hardware that we talked about and get it started hand tight. Moving underneath our vehicle now, we are going to need to lower the exhaust a little bit to give us the room that we need to get some of our hardware inside of the frame rail. What I suggest doing is taking a strap and just running it from side to side. That way when we lower the exhaust, we can kind of control how fast and how far we let it come down. To get the exhaust to drop down, we're going to have 3 rubber isolator hangers that we need to remove. So one of them's right here, and you can spray these down with some soapy water, some penetrating oil just to help loosen things up. And then you're going to take a pry bar and work that hanger off. It really doesn't matter, honestly, which side of the hanger comes off. As long as you get one of them free, we'll be in good shape. The other hanger is going to be right here on the outside portion of our muffler. Do the same thing with it. Then if we follow our exhaust pipe towards the front of our vehicle, there's also going to be an exhaust hanger right there. Get that popped off. And what we can do is loosen up our strap and let the exhaust come down a little ways. At this point, we can remove our heat shield, and this is going to be held in place with 4 10mm bolts. lower this down and set it off to the side for now. So I mentioned removing the rubber plug so we could access that hole in the bottom of our hitch. And you're gonna wanna pull out this one here, again on each side of the frame. So just pop that right out. And what we're gonna do is take a fish wire. You're gonna take the coiled end of it, feed it up, and you wanna push it towards the back of our vehicle. And what we're trying to accomplish here is we're trying to get it to come out of that square opening in the Headshare. You might have to, you know, reach in there and help kind of guide it out. Once it's dropped down, we're gonna take the square spacer block, put that over, and a carriage bolt. And that carriage bolt's gonna thread on. Then we can feed the hardware up through that hole. Until it drops down, which at this point we'll remove the fish wire. We'll grab this spacer block. Slide that up, take a flange nut, and get this started. Now that we have all of our hardware in place and hand tight, we can snug it down. The one here on the bottom of our frame rail, use a 19mm socket. If we move up here, the two bolts, we're going to use a 17mm. And then for the nut, we're going to grab a 14. Once everything's snug, we need to make sure and come back with a torque wrench and tighten everything down to the amount specified in our instructions. We are going to need to trim our heat shield a little bit. That way when we put it back up, it's not going to interfere with the new bolt that we put in on the bottom of our frame. So I just marked this area out here. I'm just going to use a pair of 10 snips to make that cut. With the heat shield trimmed out, it'll now fit around our hardware. And then we're just going to reinstall this the opposite way that we removed it. At this point, we'll go ahead, raise our exhaust back up, lubricated them again. And when you're putting them back on, you can usually just slide them back in place by hand. Let's get these back two on. Don't forget about this one here in the center. And now that the exhaust is supporting itself, we'll go ahead and remove our strap. Now what we can do is trim out a portion here on the bottom of our fascia. So there is a diagram in the instructions and it gives you some measurements, and I went ahead and marked those out. Now to me, it seems like we may not need to cut this other portion up here, kind of just taking a look at it. So I think what I'm gonna do is actually just cut this larger portion out first, because honestly, it definitely looks like this will need to be removed. And once I have that cut, I think I'm gonna hold it up against the back of her car and see if it'll fit. If not, no big deal. We can always come back and trim more, but you know, rather play it safe, not cut too much out and not need it than the other way around. So with that said, this being pretty thin plastic, I'm just gonna use a pair of snips and get that material removed. When you are cutting this, you know, before you start to cut, make sure that you don't have any wires or anything like that, you know, by chance behind the bumper. That way you don't damage anything. So with this portion trimmed out, I'll just set it against our vehicle and see what we come up with. So I held our fascia up, and it is close to fitting, but not exactly how we want it to. So I am going to indeed cut this remaining portion out, and that should put us right where we need to be. If you do end up having some rough edges and things like that around the corner, what you can do is come back with a file or a razor edge or something like that just to clean those up. With our fascia completely cut, now we can go ahead, reinstall it the opposite way that we removed it. Don't forget to plug in any electrical if you had any disconnect. But we're just going to do this in reverse. We'll get everything lined up and snap back into place. I have noticed with these on the driver's side, make sure you kind of get this panel up and under the fascia. If not, it'll kind of hang you up and make everything a little more difficult to get popped back into place. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Curt Class 3 Trailer Hitch Receiver on our 2021 Subaru Forester.